Long, long ago, so long ago that even the oldest oak trees don't remember, there was a tiny village called Sunfield, nestled between two enormous mountains. The mountains were so tall their tops were always wrapped in clouds, and in the evenings, the sunset painted those clouds every shade of orange, pink, and gold. Sunfield was a lovely village, but it had a terrible problem. For 3 years in a row, the rains had not come. The rivers had dried to dusty cracks in the earth. The fields that once grew tall, golden wheat now grew nothing but weeds and dry dirt. The villagers were hungry, and every day, their faces grew a little more thin and worried. Among all the people in Sunfield, there was one farmer who worked harder than anyone else. His name was Eli. Eli was a young man with kind brown eyes, strong hands calloused from years of digging, and a heart as wide and warm as a summer sky. He lived in a tiny cottage at the edge of the village with his grandmother, Nana Rose, who was old and frail and needed medicines that Eli could barely afford. Every morning before the sun had even fully risen, Eli would go out to his field and dig and plant and water, even though the earth was cracked and dry as old biscuits. He hauled bucket after bucket of water from the one small pond that still had a trickle of water at its bottom. He worked from sunrise to sunset without stopping, even when his back ached and his feet were blistered. The other villagers sometimes watched him from behind their fences and shook their heads sadly. "Poor Eli," they would whisper. "He works so hard, but nothing grows. Maybe he should give up." But Eli never gave up. Each evening, he would sit by Nana Rose's bed and hold her papery hand, and she would smile at him and say, "You have the most important thing in the world, my dear boy." "What is that, Nana?" he would ask. "A good heart," she would say. "And a good heart never goes unrewarded. Just you wait." Eli wanted to believe her. But that night, as he lay in his thin little bed listening to the dry wind scrape against the window, he couldn't help but feel the smallest, most secret flicker of hopelessness creep into his chest. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would try again. He had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. Crescent moon, white medium star crescent moon. The very next morning, just as Eli was pulling on his worn-out boots, a tremendous boom shook the whole village. The cups rattled on the shelf. Nana Rose sat up in bed. Every dog in Sunfield began barking at once. Eli ran outside and looked up at the mountains. A great cloud of smoke was rising from the peak of the eastern mountain. Not grey smoke like a fire, but bright, shimmering, gold and purple smoke that curled up into the sky like a ribbon being unwound. "Dragon smoke!" someone shouted. The whole village ran into the square. Everyone was frightened. Old Mayor Bunstone, who had a fat belly and very little courage, climbed up onto the fountain's edge and waved his arms. "Everyone go inside. Lock your doors. There is a dragon on the mountain, and we are all going to be eaten." People screamed and ran. Within minutes, every door in Sunfield was bolted shut and every curtain was drawn. Every door, that is, except Eli's. Eli stood in the middle of the empty square, looking up at the mountain. He could see something moving now, something enormous coming down the rocky slope, moving fast. Very fast. As it got closer, Eli saw giant wings the color of midnight, and scales that gleamed like polished copper pennies in the morning light, and two bright eyes the color of burning amber. The dragon landed in the middle of the square with a great whoosh of wings, and the force of it blew Eli's hat right off his head. The beast was enormous, as long as 5 horses standing nose to tail, with claws like curved swords and a tail that swept the dust up in spirals. Steam curled from its nostrils. The dragon looked around the empty square. Then it looked down at Eli. Eli looked up at the dragon. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The dragon tilted its huge head sideways, exactly like a curious dog, which Eli found so unexpected that he almost laughed. "You are not running," said the dragon. Its voice was deep as thunder rumbling inside a cave. "No," said Eli. "I'm not." "Why not?" All the others ran. Eli thought about this seriously. He straightened his back and looked the dragon in its great amber eyes. "Because running won't fix my field," he said simply. "And I have work to do." The dragon stared at him. Then it did something Eli had never in his whole life expected a dragon to do. It laughed. A warm, booming, genuinely delighted laugh that shook the windows of every house in Sunfield and made a few roof tiles slide sideways. "I like you," the dragon declared. "My name is Scorchwing. And you, little farmer, are the bravest person I have met in 300 years. Dragon red heart sheaf of rice. Scorchwing settled himself in the square, carefully folding his enormous wings so they didn't knock anything over, and Eli brought out 2 stools from his cottage. They sat together in the sunshine, one small farmer and one very large dragon, having a conversation as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. Eli learned many things about Scorchwing that morning. He learned that dragons lived for over 500 years. He learned that Scorchwing was considered quite young, at only 342. He learned that the gold and purple smoke earlier had happened because Scorchwing had sneezed in his sleep. Dragon sneezes, apparently, are very dramatic. But then Scorchwing told Eli something else. Something sad. Do you know why your land is dry? The dragon asked quietly. The rains haven't come, Eli said. Yes, said Scorchwing. But do you know why the rains haven't come? Eli shook his head. Scorchwing was quiet for a moment. He looked down at his great copper-scaled feet. There is a water serpent, he said finally. Her name is Myra, and she lives in the Lake of Crystals, high in the mountains behind your village. She is the one who controls the rain clouds for this whole valley. For 3 years, she has been sleeping, a cursed sleep, because a wicked sorcerer stole her magic scale of rain. Without that scale, she cannot wake up, and without Myra awake, the clouds never come. That's terrible. Eli said. Where is the magic scale? The sorcerer who stole it, his name was Grim. He hid the scale deep inside the thornwood, inside a box locked with a puzzle that only someone truly pure of heart can solve, Scorchwing said. I have tried 3 times to get it, but I cannot enter the thornwood. My fire burns the trees, and my wings are too large to fit between them, and my claws, well. The dragon looked at his fearsome claws and sighed. My claws are not exactly delicate. Eli looked at his own hands. They were rough and calloused, yes, but they were small, and careful, and skilled at detailed, precise work. The hands of someone who had spent years nurturing tiny seeds. I could do it, Eli said. Scorchwing looked at him very carefully. It is dangerous, the dragon said. The thornwood is full of tricks and traps. Creatures that try to confuse travelers. Paths that circle back on themselves. And the puzzle box, if someone with a selfish heart tries to open it, they are locked inside it forever. Eli thought of Nana Rose in her bed, getting thinner every day. He thought of his neighbors, their frightened, hungry faces. He thought of the dry, cracked fields. When do we leave? He said. Scorchwing smiled. And when a dragon smiles, it is a magnificent and slightly terrifying thing, because of all the teeth. Dawn tomorrow, said Scorchwing. And Eli, bring nothing but a kind heart. In the thornwood, that is the only weapon that matters. Evergreen tree old key dizzy. Mushroom fox face cyclone. The next morning, as the sky turned from black to deep purple to pale gold, Eli said goodbye to Nana Rose. He told her where he was going, and instead of being frightened, she squeezed his hand and said, I always knew it would be you, my dear. I always knew. Eli and Scorchwing set off together, Eli walking, Scorchwing flying low overhead so he could be near without crushing the trees. They traveled for half a day through dry hills and rocky paths before they reached the edge of the thornwood. The forest was dark even in the middle of the morning. The trees grew so close together, their branches tangled into a ceiling that blocked the sky. Their trunks were covered in silver-gray moss that seemed to glow faintly. Between the trees, the shadows moved, not from wind, but of their own accord. I will wait here, Scorchwing said, and there was something in the great dragon's voice that Eli had never expected. Nervousness. Remember, be kind. Even to things that seem unkind to you. That is the first rule of the thornwood. Eli took a deep breath and walked in. The moment he entered the forest, the sounds of the outside world vanished. No bird calls. No wind. Just his own footsteps and his own heartbeat. The path wound ahead of him, silvery and narrow. He had not walked far when he found a small fox sitting in the middle of the path. The fox had bright, clever eyes and a torn ear, and it was tugging at something caught around its leg, a loop of thorns that had wrapped itself tight. Help me, the fox said, because in magical forests, foxes talk, and Eli took this in his stride. But the fox was also, Eli noticed, blocking the path entirely. And when he stepped closer, he saw that around the fox's neck hung a small carved sign that said, Trickster. This was clearly a trap. The fox had probably lured dozens of travelers into stopping, and then, something bad happened. Eli thought about walking around the fox. Then he thought about what Scorchwing had said. Be kind, even to things that seem unkind. He knelt down. Carefully, gently, he unwound the thorns from the fox's leg. The thorns pricked his fingers and he winced, but he kept going until the leg was free. The fox shook itself and stared at Eli with those clever eyes. Most people walk past me, the fox said, or try to shoo me away. Your leg was hurt, Eli said simply. The fox was quiet for a moment. Then it said, very quietly, the puzzle box is in the heart of the forest. When you reach the 3 silver trees, take the middle path. I will repay your kindness. And it disappeared into the shadows. The forest tried many other tricks on Eli. A beautiful voice called to him from the left, promising treasure and riches, but Eli remembered he hadn't come for treasure. A path appeared that seemed shorter and easier, but something felt wrong about it, and Eli chose the harder, longer path instead. Glowing mushrooms offered him sweets that smelled delicious, and Eli said no, thank you very politely, which confused the mushrooms greatly because nobody had ever been polite to them before. Finally, after what felt like hours, Eli reached 3 silver trees. He took the middle path, just as the fox had said. And there, in a small clearing where a single ray of sunlight fell perfectly from a gap in the canopy, sat a plain wooden box on a mossy stone. The puzzle box. Package sparkles key. ? Light bulb water wave. The box was smaller than Eli had expected, about the size of a large book. It was made of dark wood carved all over with swirling patterns that looked like rain and rivers and clouds. On the lid was a series of small carved panels, each one showing a different scene. There were no locks, no keyholes. Just those panels. Eli sat down cross-legged in front of the box and looked at each panel carefully. There were 6 of them, and each one showed a choice. A person at a crossroads. A person with a bag of gold and a hungry child beside them. A person finding something that belonged to someone else. A person whose friend had done something wrong. A person who was tired, and a person who needed help. A person who was frightened, and a door in front of them. Eli understod. These weren't locks. They were questions. And the box was listening to his heart. He placed his hand on the first panel, the crossroads, and thought honestly about his choice. He always chose the path that helped others, even when it was harder. The panel glowed softly gold. He touched the second panel, the gold and the hungry child. He thought about all the times he had given his last bit of bread to Nana Rose, or to a neighbor's crying child, even when he was hungry himself. The panel glowed. Panel after panel, Eli answered with his heart, not with words, just with honesty. Not because he was showing off, but because he genuinely could not imagine choosing any other way. Sharing when you have little. Returning things that weren't yours. Telling the truth even when it cost you something. Helping even when you were exhausted. Walking through the frightening door because someone needed you to. One by one, the panels lit up with warm golden light. When the last panel glowed, there was a soft click. The box opened. Inside, on a bed of blue velvet, lay a scale, about the size of Eli's palm, shaped like a teardrop, the deepest, most brilliant blue he had ever seen, like the color of a perfect summer sky reflected in a still pond. As he watched, tiny droplets of water appeared on its surface and then evaporated, and appeared, and evaporated, like rain that couldn't quite fall. "Hello," said a voice. Eli looked up. Sitting on the edge of the mossy stone, curled up small as a cat, was a creature made entirely of water. He could see right through her to the trees behind. She had the shape of a serpent, but with fins like silk and eyes the color of deep rivers. The water serpent, Myra, trapped in a tiny form by the curse. "You opened the box," Myra said. Her voice sounded like rain on a windowpane. "A pure heart," as the sorcerer demanded. "Take the scale and touch it to my forehead. It is the only thing that can break the curse." Eli very carefully picked up the scale of rain. It was warm in his hand and vibrated gently, like something alive. He reached out and touched it to Myra's watery forehead. There was a flash of brilliant blue light. The scale vanished. And Myra, the water serpent, began to grow. She uncurled and expanded, growing larger and larger until she filled the whole clearing, enormous and majestic, gleaming like 1,000 rivers in sunlight. She reared up and threw back her head and let out a sound that wasn't quite a roar and wasn't quite a song but was something between the two, something that vibrated in Eli's chest and made his eyes fill with tears for reasons he couldn't entirely explain. Thank you, Myra said, and her voice was now so vast it shook the trees. She looked down at Eli with eyes that held oceans in them. You have freed me. Ask any one thing of me, and I will grant it. Anything you desire. Eli looked up at her without hesitation. Please bring rain to Sunfield, he said. And to all the dry valleys. That's all I want. Myra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice that was softer now, gentler. Most people ask for gold. Or power. Or eternal life. I want my village to eat again, Eli said. And my neighbors to not be hungry. That's enough for me. Myra smiled, and when a water serpent smiles, it looks like sunlight dancing on the surface of a moving river. Then rain it shall be, she said. And more than rain. For your heart, Eli, I will give Sunfield 5 years of the best weather it has ever known. The most beautiful harvests. The clearest skies and the gentlest rains in perfect season. And your grandmother, she will be well by morning. Eli couldn't speak. He pressed his hand to his heart and bowed his head, because sometimes there are no words big enough. Rainbow droplet sheaf of rice. Umbrella with rain drops sunflower house with garden. Eli ran back through the thornwood. The trees seemed different now, lighter, less tangled, as if the whole forest had exhaled in relief. He passed the spot where the fox had been, and there was nothing there now except a small patch of wildflowers that hadn't been there before. He ran out of the trees and into Scorchwing's waiting gaze. Well, said the dragon. It's done, said Eli, still breathing hard. Scorchwing made a sound that was half roar, half purr, and entirely joyful. He spread his enormous wings and launched himself into the sky, doing a loop that sent gold and purple sparks showering down like a fireworks display. Look up. Scorchwing bellowed from the sky. Eli looked up. High above, impossibly high, far above even where Scorchwing was flying, something vast and silver was moving across the sky. Something with fins like silk and eyes like deep rivers. Myra, in her full size, was enormous, far larger than any creature Eli had ever imagined. She moved through the upper air like water moves through water, graceful and immense, and where she passed, clouds formed in her wake. Great, beautiful, grey and white rain clouds, piling up and darkening, rolling toward the valley with quiet authority. The first drops fell on Eli's upturned face before he even made it back to the road. By the time he and Scorchwing reached the edge of Sunfield, it was raining steadily, a warm, soft, perfect rain that smelled like earth and green things and hope. The dry creek beds were already beginning to trickle. The cracked ground was turning dark with moisture. The villagers came out of their houses slowly at first, cautiously, not quite believing. Then Mayor Bunstone came out, and he put his hand up and felt the rain on his palm, and he burst into tears right there in the street, which was embarrassing for him but very understandable. Then everyone was outside, laughing and crying and tilting their faces up to the sky. Scorchwing landed in the square again. This time, nobody ran. They stared at the dragon, and the dragon stared back, and then a small girl named Petra, she was 6, and had absolutely no fear, walked right up to Scorchwing and patted his great copper-scaled nose and said, "Hello, dragon. Are you a good dragon?" "I am trying to be," said Scorchwing, and he looked at Eli when he said it. In the days that followed, the village transformed. The rains came exactly as Myra had promised. Not too much, not too little, always at the right time. Seeds that Eli had planted in that dry, cracked earth began to sprout. Within 2 weeks, his field was covered in a carpet of pale green shoots that grew taller every day. By harvest time, Eli's field produced more wheat than anyone in Sunfield had ever seen in their lives. Enough to fill every storehouse. Enough to share with the neighboring villages. Enough to sell at the market, so Eli could finally buy proper medicine, warm blankets, and a comfortable new chair for Nana Rose. Nana Rose herself had woken the morning after the puzzle box opened feeling better than she had in years. She said it was just the rain, the damp air, the relief of everything, but when she winked at Eli, they both knew it was something more. Scorchwing became Sunfield's most unusual and most beloved resident. He didn't live in the village exactly. He had his cave up the mountain where he preferred to sleep and read. Dragons, it turned out, are great readers. Scorchwing had an enormous library in his cave, and he was very particular about how the books were organized. But he came down most mornings and helped in the fields, being careful with his claws. He could clear a field of rocks in minutes. He could warm a greenhouse on a cold night. He turned out to be excellent at keeping away the rabbits that ate the crops, because one look at Scorchwing and the rabbits made sensible decisions about their priorities. And every evening, Eli would sit with Nana Rose on the little porch of their cottage, and Scorchwing would settle nearby like an enormous copper-scaled cat, and they would watch the sun go down over the fields. The sky was always beautiful now, the most remarkable sunsets Eli had ever seen, painting the clouds every color imaginable. "You never asked for anything for yourself," Scorchwing said to Eli one evening. "I got what I needed," Eli said. "What is that?" asked the dragon. Eli looked at the golden fields and the happy village in the distance, and Nana Rose dozing peacefully beside him in her chair, and he smiled. "Enough," said Eli. "More than enough." And overhead, in the great blue sky above the valley, if you looked very carefully between the clouds, you might just catch a glimpse of something vast and silver and shining. Myra, the water serpent, moving silently through the upper air, making sure the rains came in perfect season, year after year after year. Because kindness, real, genuine, unself-conscious kindness, has a way of rippling outward, like a stone dropped in water, touching shores you never even knew existed.